I just got done with a truly epic multi-day vibe coding binge on Convex Chef. And oh boy, was it quite the journey. I ended up recording about 60 gigabytes of footage, which I managed to compress down into a 2.5 hour video. Now, I don't expect many of you to watch all of that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But there were lots of really interesting things that I learned along the way that I think would be really valuable to share with you guys. So grab yourself a lovely cup of tea and let's get started. Okay, so the plan at the start was to build a local events aggregator and notifier app. Actually, I'll just let Past Mike explain it. What I want to do is see if we can build a project where it's going to be able to scrape this page, and there's also a number of other pages, like there's this page, and then there's like this page, they've got events on them. And what I want it to do is see whether we can scrape this, put it all together in one Convex database, and then have it email me when there's new things come in that I might be interested in. At first, I really honestly did not expect to be able to vibe the entire thing on Chef. But as time went on, it just kept on delivering. Now let's sign out. What are we going to see if we refresh this page? Great, cool. So it did a great job. Well, here we go. Okay, so supposedly oh, here we go. Fantastic. Wow, the golden fleece, there it is. Seniors Connect, Reconciliation Walk, and my favorite, the course. This is perfect. Awesome. This is so cool. By the end of the first day of the project, I was like really impressed with the output. Here's Past Mike again to summarize. I mean, this is the first I've ever gone on Chef, in fact, on any like vibe coding tool without having to escape out. So the fact that we've gotten this far, I think, is a result of us keeping those prompts really small and the chunks of work small. But unfortunately, though, after the first day, some cracks did start to show. Okay, I don't want to click this because it might cause me rate limit issues, and it's not exact. I wanted to control how we do this. What did that fail? Error. Value does not match validator. Then as the second day progressed, things just started to slow down more and more, and errors became more and more frequent. Okay, we're back. So it has finished the changes, and it didn't error, which is nice this time. But it has changed more than I wanted it to. So it's changed the name of the app through and has made some changes. Now, I was just looking at what it's done at the code. And to be perfectly honest, I don't actually fully understand what it's doing here. And by the end, each prompt that I did was just a roll of the dice whether it would work or not and break everything in the process. But what it had done, it re-implemented the whole basically vector search algorithm and everything, cosine similarity inside of the code itself, which is not what I wanted. We want to use the vector search ability of Convex to true. So I'm just going to default it to true. And I'm just going to manually alter the code. I don't know what it's doing, but we need to move on. So 1 second. Okay, so there was a lot I took away from the process. So I'm going to share some of these learnings with you now. So these items, by the way, are in no particular order, but let's get into it. So this is something I talked about in my 5 chef prompting tips video, which you can check out here if you're interested. But the importance of keeping the number of things that you ask AI to do within a single prompt small just cannot be overstated, particularly as the project grows. I was tempted to do more inside this prompt, but I'm like, no. We'll keep it simple. We'll follow the 5 rules of chef prompting, because as the project grows, the AI and your ability to keep everything within context all the time just reduces. There are actually a couple occasions during the process where I didn't follow this rule myself, and it resulted in the AI just changing way too much or going off track and got stuck into error loops. And this meant I had to rewind the project, which ended up wasting tons of tokens and tons of time. So if you take nothing else away from this video, just take this one thing. If you are going to try and vibe a project like this, keep your changes that you ask AI to do small. At first, things went well. The AI and I were working well together. But as things progressed, it started to make changes that I didn't explicitly ask for. The changes, and it didn't error, which is nice this time. But it has changed more than I wanted it to. So it's changed the name of the app. It's added the admin button and got rid of those 2 buttons that were here. But it's also added this welcome user, which I didn't want. And it's also removed the subheading It's also changed the cards here, which is not what I wanted either. And most frustratingly is that some of the changes that it did were good and I wanted to keep those, and the other changes weren't good and I wanted to undo those. But Chef at the time just doesn't have the ability to selectively choose which edits I want to keep and which edits I don't. So I would have to either keep all of them or none of them and basically rewind the whole step. Why is it changed the look of everything? What, like, why? What's going on here? So I guess the question should be, should Chef offer the ability for people to choose which updates you want to accept and which ones not to? I'm not sure, because on one hand, I kind of do like it, just the simplicity of just going with whatever the AI cooks up. It keeps things nice and simple, particularly as well for like people who using Chef who might not be coders. But on the other hand, there are times that I wish I could be more selective with the updates that it makes. So I don't know. Leave me a comment down below if you have any thoughts or ideas. So this project took a lot longer than I expected it to take. And I mean, that is for multiple reasons, but I think one of the big ones is just the sheer amount of time it takes for Claude to output the tokens. And I think a lot of the reason for that is just due to the way that Chef makes changes to files, because unfortunately it can't make surgical edits to the file. That means that, like changing just 1 or 2 lines. Instead, it has to rewrite the entire file. And the problem with that is that as the project goes on, files tend to get larger and larger as the AI likes to dump everything into a single file. And that means that each time it needs to make a small change to just one file, it just has to re-output the entire thing, which just takes a long time. This just in, Chef has just released an update that actually does do those kind of surgical edits that I want. So it's now much faster to make small changes and results in far fewer tokens. So I wish I had this a couple of days ago, but it's awesome news anyway. There were lots of occasions during the project, particularly after the first day, where I found myself diving into the code to try and understand what it was doing, or to try and debug an issue that had cropped up. So being able to inspect the code was a feature of Chef that I found super important to allow me to get to the point that I did in this project. And some other vibe coding tools either don't let you edit the code or even see the code at all. So I think if that was the case in Chef, I would not have been able to get this far. But to just be clear, I do think that in the future, we'll get to a point with these vibe coding tools and with AI and LLMs in general that we really don't need to see the code. We can just treat it as a black box. It's just that future isn't quite here yet. So there were a couple of occasions during the project where we needed to make a change to the schema, but there was already data in the database. And this ended up being a bit of an issue. Actually, I'll just let past Mike explain it. Going to be here, I don't know whether I should do this now, is I know from my past experience with Convex that changing the schema of something that's already got data in the table. So the fact that this event date is a string here, we're going to change it to be a number. It's going to be a timestamp, a single number, so that we can search, we can sort on it and filter on it and stuff like that. But to do that, it's going to have to modify the existing data. And the way that we do this normally in a production app is you would have a migration and you would make a change that made the schema value for the event date a union of string or number. So then all data within the table still matches that type. So it's string or number because it's a string. And then what you do is you do run a migration pass where it would loop through all the values in the table and it would change them over from being a string to being a number. And then you would do another schema change, which would get rid of that string option. So it would just be event date is number. So then you complete the migration there. Now, I don't think Chef is capable of doing migrations. So by asking it to change this now, I think it's going to cause issues. So this idea of migrations works well for production applications, but in development, it's often easy just to either manually delete the data or modify it yourself via the dashboard. And unfortunately, Chef doesn't have the ability to alter the data in the database itself which means that it has to try and do this migration, multi-step migration process. And it just ends up being kind of error prone and more complicated than necessary, I think. And this is possible because, as Past Mike says, we do have an MCP server. You can do this through the MCP server. So I have videos that you can find on the channel about that. We have an MCP server for Convex, but I don't think that Chef has got the ability to alter the data in the database, which is a shame. It would be really nice if it could do that, if it could just go straight into the database and delete the bits out that it needs to. But I can see that there may also be kind of worries around allowing the AI to mutate your data like that. But so I think it would be awesome if a future version of Chef can directly alter the data in the database without having to go via migrations. I think this would be a really big selling point for Chef. It would just take away many of these headaches that you have to deal with when you want to make schema changes and you already have data in the database. As the project went on, the codebase started to grow, and I started to notice that things were being changed that I really didn't ask for. But it has changed more than I wanted it to. I think this one issue alone, just became the biggest issue for me overall. Don't change stuff that you shouldn't be changing. All we want to do is change the event date. I just became so nervous that any prompt that I asked it to do was just going to cause everything to change or break. It's gone through, I'm very nervous now about what has changed after what we've experienced so far. And towards the end, there were just times where I just spent so long just trying to coax the AI into doing just the one thing that I asked it to do. And in the end, I just ended up rewinding everything and just making the change manually in the code myself. The vector search stuff. So I'm like, just forget it, stop. What I'm going to do, I think, is I'm just going to roll back to before I taught to do these things, and I'm going to manually find the place where that is active, is where that subscription is created. And I'm just going to set that is active to true. So I'm just going to default it to true. And I'm just going to manually alter the code. I don't know what it's doing. I'll just caveat here that because before, when I was doing this, there was no ability for Chef to make surgical edits. That now that it can make surgical edits, now, just one or two line change to the file, that this may not be such an issue. I think it might well have been an issue because it would hallucinate things along the way of the output, changing more than it needed to. So I'm hoping that if I was to do this again, this might not be quite such an issue. So over the course of the video, you can see that I start off getting wins early, but then as the code base develops, I run into more and more issues with a much higher frequency, and I just have to rewind more often. Now, this could be as a result of things that aren't related to AI. For example, maybe I was leaving the more complex tasks towards the end, or perhaps I was just getting tired and getting lazy with my prompting and putting too much into the prompt, thus making it more difficult for AI. But I do also think that a large part of it is because that as the code base grows, it also grows in complexity, and therefore the AI's ability to keep it all in context just diminishes. And if you don't mind just taking a little quick tangent, this is kind of related to a discussion I had with some colleagues recently, where that highlights some of the differences between like a more junior coder or a more senior coder. You see, at the start of a project, a senior developer, a junior developer, or an LLM, they all look kind of similar. They're all able to hack on a project and get something going pretty quickly, no problem. But as time progresses and the code base starts developing and you have more requirements come in that mean that you have to change this thing over here and then this thing over here and this thing over here, the differences between a senior developer and a more junior developer start to show. So a senior developer just simply has more experience and knows that they should probably organize their code in certain ways to make things more maintainable. They know that, for example, they should group code together that is going to change together. And they know that they should use maybe these types and not these types because they want to use the compiler to prevent like future headaches. A more junior developer, and I would argue LLMs of today as well, would try to solve the problem immediately and would have less concern for future development. And to me, during this process, it became crystal clear when I started seeing that the AI was using like the TypeScript any type with increasing frequency. We'll have a look in this quick sec. I just noticed though that there's another usage of any here. which makes me more nervous. Hashtag vibe coding. I think it was just putting these types in so it could satisfy the TypeScript type checker and then just declare that it was done with the task. And so to me, I think that this really does show that in its current form, like LLMs are very much like junior level developers, and they're just trying to treat the symptoms without trying to solve for the underlying issue or you're concerned about future work. Now, I might be in a minority here, but I do think that even with today's LLMs, we could train the AI to be more like a senior developer, maybe with like some sort of working memory or more careful system prompts. And if we did that, we would end up with a better result on these sort of like longer, pure vibe coding projects. And one last thing here before I finish my little rant is that I think maybe Chef, we can make some changes to Chef here to perhaps do more with linting, maybe ESLint or more strict TypeScript configuration properties to reduce like cyclic complexity or whatever, to get the LLM to self-correct itself before we end up in a spaghetti nightmare. So, conclusion time. Firstly, would it have been faster for me to do this myself? At 2 and a bit days for the result that we have, I would say a solid maybe. If I had stopped after the first day, then sure, yeah, I would definitely say yeah. That the output that we got after the first day was quite a lot for just 1 day's worth of work. But as the project went on, I started to lose more and more time to rewinds, and things just slowed down just a lot more. And as the AI started making more and more changes without me asking to, I increasingly started to lose confidence in the code that it had written. I no longer understood what it was doing and no longer trusted its output would perform correctly or be performant as we added more events to the system. So I guess the next question is, what would I do differently next time? I think when I started to feel like it was making too many mistakes or there were like more errors than I would expect at runtime, I probably at that point should have stopped and then ejected out and started to just take more control over it myself. I think one thing I definitely will continue to do though is keep the prompts small and keep the number of changes to minimum. But in general, I was incredibly impressed with how far I was able to get just purely on Chef. So for this project specifically, I think I'm going to continue it on. I might eject out and then continue to fix it up in Cursor or Windsurf and try and get it into production properly. So if that's something you would like to see, then maybe I can record the process. Leave me a comment down below if that's something you'd like to see. And if you like this video, then maybe you want to check out this video from a couple of months back when we first released Chef. Just check out the amount of improvement from then till now. It's just mind-blowing. Anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, cheerio.